Thank you very much. May I first say that commenting on Karl Marx and the sales of his literature, it was a bad thing, of course, that sales are increasing. On the other hand, it's from a very low level. That's the good thing. When I studied at University of Lund in southern Sweden 40 years ago, the sales were really too high, which meant a lot of problems for decades for Swedish economy and for the Swedish political system as well. First of all, I'm very glad to be back in Tallinn and Estonia again. I have over the years since 1991 been here several times as a politician and also as a personal friend. That is a very good thing. And I'm enjoying to see the success of the Estonian people and the Estonian politicians, especially some parties. I'm going to talk about first of all, some reflections on how to handle financial crisis. Secondly, about the Swedish financial crisis. And I cannot avoid commenting to some extent on what's happened in the United States, which I see as, to some extent, bad example for the future. First of all, roots of financial crisis, banking crisis, they can always be different. The big banking crisis in the United States in 1932-33, when all banks had to be closed in 1933 for 1 week and then reopened after investigation whether they were apt to be able to be banks again. That main cause at that time was the fall in prices on agricultural products and thus also fall on land prices, which have been, well, a lot of loans given by banks. That was one of the main reasons for that. In Sweden in 91 or 1990-91, we had an overheated economy in the late 80s where with high inflation people were speculating in real estate. And since we still had currency regulations, adding to what Johnny Munkhammar said about the risk of regulation, we abolished the credit market regulations in 85 with high inflation and with other political obstacles in having a big impact. But we also avoided getting away from the currency regulation until 1989. So all the Swedes that wanted to speculate could speculate in at that time was Swedish real estate. So that gave us a bathtub effect. It was a very bad situation with this regulation. And today in the United States we see the subprime, I mean the home loan, and also in Great Britain we have the same situation. So roots can be different. Circumstances can be different as well. I mean, obviously, we had a very easy situation in Sweden in the beginning of the 90s, technically speaking, because we had plain vanilla, as they say in the financial markets. We had loans from banks to individuals or corporations that were invested in real estate. The real estate fell in prices. We could value the collateral. We could see exactly the risk over time that banks would collapse and so on. So we could follow this. Circumstances this time in the US and global financial crisis is the per se good thing of securitizing to put together loans of different risks into packages and then repackage them once, twice or 3 times again. And obviously this makes the situation much more difficult to handle, since how do you value something that you cannot value? You don't really see what the risk really is in the original loan, and there are many loans repackaged, as I said, many times. So it's a more difficult situation, I would say. But there are always 2 things that are common in every financial crisis, or every banking crisis. First thing is that you have a situation, for one reason or another, where the asset side of the balance sheets of banks shrinks due to write-offs or losses. That's one thing that's always there. Write-offs or losses make the capital base of banks shrink. The second thing is that you have a loss of confidence in financial markets. These 2 things are always there, and you can see them. For instance, in Sweden, so far at least, we don't have the problem of eroding capital bases in the banks. There might be some problem, but the Swedish banks are so far very strong. But we have, as most other countries, a lack of confidence in the market. These problems or these things might be handled by the private sector. I was surprised myself to see that sovereign wealth funds went into Citigroup, Merrill Lynch, and other American institutions in a way which helped out. At one time, I think the losses were about 500 billion losses in banks or write-offs in banks, and of this, almost 80% was financed by the private sector, mainly by the sovereign wealth funds. This couldn't go on since the losses became, or write-offs became even more over time. But even if there might be a situation where the private sector can make the solution itself, if it's not one institution, if it's a big crisis, there is always need, it's unavoidable for government intervention. Government has to take this responsibility. And I'd like to point out that I am a market liberal. I was even called, when I was party leader, by a commentator in one of the newspapers as the only libertarian, which is not true, to be honest, party leader ever in Swedish history. But I'm a market liberal, and I don't want government interference to keep it as small as possible government in a country. On the other hand, sometimes government has to be there and be very strong. That's a good thing for a market liberal to understand. The direct and indirect effects of capital basis shrinking and loss of confidence is, of course, a credit crunch. If you have a credit crunch in a country, you won't have the possibility to finance the corporations, small businesses. They will have problems in having loans. There even might be, since the banks would like to shrink not only the asset side but also the other side, they want to get rid of some of the loans, even if they are good and solid loans. So you have a problem with a credit crunch. There will be difficult to have new loans, both for homeowners and corporations, small businesses, and there even might be a situation where the banks themselves have to handle the situation in order to keep their capital adequacy ratios, which are by law. Then they have to do away with some of the loans, even if the businesses are sound. And that's a problem, of course. And the loss of confidence also reflects on the real economy. There is a loss of confidence now in the market, which means that institutions are afraid to borrow to each other. We have it in Sweden, you probably have it here, you have it in the US. They are afraid to see who is the one who has more losses. Can I lose something? Can I lose something myself? And then they are afraid. So if they do the loan, they want to have more in interest. So you have interest rates going up and you have problems with liquidity. The debt office in Sweden, together with the Riksbank, the central bank in Sweden, today are the main furnisher of liquidity in the Swedish financial system. Altogether, 600-700 billion Swedish kronor. It's a bad thing. It cannot last forever, of course. So this you have. And you also have a loss of confidence when it comes to ordinary people. I mean, they are afraid to lose money. They are afraid that the economy will get worse and it will go down in a way. And then the reaction is, of course, let's save for the future. Then the consumption goes down. Then you have a negative spiral in the economy. So what the government has to do is to address both these things. First, the problem with capital, to restore the capital base in the financial sector. Secondly, try to restore confidence in order to minimize the effects on the real economy. And one thing I would say, it's necessary not to lag behind. It's like a tsunami. If you want to stop it from hurting people and property, then you have to be there and guard the beaches and say, okay, we stop it at the beach. It won't come on land. It's the same if you're lagging behind and you just react to a financial crisis, it's difficult to stop it. You get more hurt by it. But if you are proactive, try to see what might happen and what could you do about it in advance, then you might have a bigger chance, or you'll have a bigger chance to handle it. From these reflections over to the Swedish situation in the 90s, when I had the, doubtful pleasure of being a minister responsible to handle the situation.